Is that the, yeah, it is. Okay. This blurb today comes from some pretty awesome work that I got to do with some grade 5 classes. And I think I saw Mona in the audience. I sure did. And one of the questions that came from that work was, okay, this is great and all, but what do we do with our English as additional language learners? And here's the thing I've discovered. A lot of the work around morphology and the processes and kind of how we start and how we build it all assume that we have some oral language proficiency. And some of our humans, tiny humans, big humans, medium-sized humans, don't have that because they're still learning the language. So I met with Stephanie Doddick, who happens to be a wealth of knowledge related to supporting EAL students. And this is what she shared with me. So being able to connect morphology with parts of speech help our English as additional language learners see, the trees in the forest. They see how it's all kind of connected. So you can take a base element such as SPECT and show them how it becomes a verb, it becomes a noun, it becomes an adverb, it becomes an adjective. You can include other words. Sorry, this is what happens when I get my mouse moving too quickly. Other words in the family. And then just because I was being me, I wrote a sentence using as many of the words as I could, but that would not be the requirement of your language learners. You might give them the words and they have to build the word sums. You might give them the word sums and they build the words. For the bottom row there, I gave one word sum, but then I would ask my students to build out the other missing word sums. And then ask them to write a sentence using one of them in here. This is particularly helpful with a lot of those tier 2 words that kiddos are going to come across in various texts, various subject areas, but helps bring some of the pieces together. Okay. So it might be just a little too much in this chart form. So here's another way that we can do this. I'm going to pause here for a second. The other thing that Stephanie suggested to me was add visuals. And I don't know why, I know this, but she said it and I was like, well, duh, of course I'm going to add some visuals. So this is CAV as a base. So I added a picture. So now when we see it, both for our language learners and for our kiddos that just struggle with reading, adding visuals is always a good use of your time. Okay. So, we totally have time. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to look at this word matrix. Now, some of you might not be familiar with a word matrix. Here's like the fastest rundown you've ever seen. You have to include the middle, this base element. It's bolded. Any other bolded words in the matrix are also base elements, but it's not like the main theme that's happening. All the words that we're going to build have a sense of hollowness related to this base. You build from left to right. You don't have to add a prefix. You can't skip. So I can't go from CAVE. I can't go CAVE, skip ATE, and then go over here. If I want to have access to these endings, they would show up in another spot because we cannot cross, oh, for the love of Pete, we cannot cross horizontal lines in a word matrix. Now, here's something I'm noticing in various word matrices that I'm finding that people are building. Various people, smart people. ITY is actually a connecting vowel and a suffix. I'm noticing that some people are not putting them as two separate things, but putting the connecting vowel together with the suffix in the box. I probably wouldn't, which tells you I didn't build this word matrix. I found it online, but you do what's best for you. Okay. Remember, a word matrix is rarely complete and it's totally contextual. So I could change this up as I gain and learn more information. So what I would like for you to do is try to build out, let's say, at least 3 words using this word matrix. What can you come up with? 3 words. If you want to be really diligent, you can write out the word sums. Ooh, look at Greg with all of his toggling. I love it. Awesome. So we've got cavity coming out, excavation, excavates, cavities. You become more proficient, obviously, with everything you do. I don't love how word sums look when they're typed, just because I like to actually cross things off. And so to show that you're crossing out that final non-syllabic E, we usually do a slash line at the end of it. And same for the Y to I toggling, you just do that slash and it shows, that's the indicator that you know that there's a change happening. But I much prefer to have it written out by hand. So there are many things that you can ask students to build, many words in this word family. The rule with building words, because when you start doing this, it's not even if you introduce it too quickly, it's just they can't help themselves, but they just start randomly putting things together. And then you end up with this weird vegetable soup instead of a word. And so if they can't actually use the word in a sentence that they've built, they don't get to include it in their list. So it's another way to kind of build out understanding for vocabulary. But here's where you make the connection piece. Now, you could do this a couple of ways. Just like I asked you to create some words using this particular word matrix. Now, I was totally type A who spent way too much money on her classroom. And so I might have each of these little symbols as stickers. And each kiddo would get a noun symbol, a verb symbol, an adjective symbol, and an adverb symbol. And I'd ask them to put a sticker next to which of their words are like that. So if excavates is a verb, I would put the verb sticker next to it. Now you could just as easily just write the word verb. But this is where I'm a little much sometimes. Okay. So, and we wouldn't need them to classify every word they write because that doesn't sound like fun for anyone. But asking them to pick one of each, manageable. Okay. And then they might start noticing a pattern. Like when I add this suffix, an adjective happens. When I add this suffix, an adverb happens. And we're starting to ask them to really think about the kinds of words that we have, and it just gives them another layer to sort and understand them. But here's another way that you could do this. So have the word matrix up on the board, wherever it lives. Give them a piece of paper. Now, you could have this all laid out and photocopied, but friends, we can also just use a piece of paper. Fold it into quarters. They write noun, adjective, verb, adverb, or whatever it is. And as they build word sums, they have to sort them. So Cavity is a person, place, or thing. So I'm going to put it in a noun. Concave is an adjective. So I'm going to put it over there. And they would write the word sum as they sort. If that's too much of a cognitive load, you're like, you want them sorting and word summing and all this stuff, split it into different tasks. So one day we write the list, the next day we do the sort for the parts of speech. You could also, if you don't want them, or to extend the sort, you could say, okay, now I want you to pick one of the nouns and write a sentence, or I want you to pick one of the verbs and write a sentence, or whatever it is. Okay, Greg, do you want to expand on your comment in the chat box just so folks can get a sense of what you're saying?
So yeah, so like when we find a new suffix, we write it up on the board and we try to kind of give it a little bit of a meaning so we know what to do with it. And so as we've been going through, like I'm looking at it right now, I have meant, which is like doing into a thing, age, like, or MENT, AGE says verb into a noun, ION, turning a noun into an idea, or like turning a thing into an idea. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, and you're going to notice patterns. This is where you can be very clever with the words that you pick to case study so that your students can see the pattern clearly. So then you can ask the question, what do you notice about our, for example, words that have MENT at the end? What do you notice that suffix is doing? Does it always do that? Because we're learning now that certain prefixes don't just mean one thing. They can mean more than one thing. And that can sometimes make people angry if they only learned it as one thing. Here's another way that you can stretch and support students who potentially speak another language or are just learning English. This is a Frere model. There are many ways that you can use this tool, some more helpful than others, but I love the way that Stephanie talked about this particular thing. So here's an example. If my base word is play, play, then what are some words that are in the family? And I'm going to build them out as word sums. So I have replay, playing, player, playful. What is not in the family? Lay, clay. So rhyming words, not in the family. Recess. Nope. I can have fun and play outside, but that doesn't mean it's part of the family. Fun. Play, plain. So just because it kind of sounds the same doesn't mean it's in the family. Have them draw some sort of a picture. And then this is the part I love. How do you say it in your home language? Build a connection to the language that they know and are familiar with. I just use Google Translate. So I hope to heaven that Google knows how to speak Ukrainian when it comes to this particular word. They'll tell you if it does or doesn't. But I just think this is a really powerful way that you can engage families or students who have another language in their home with including it in the work that you do. Because just because they're learning English doesn't mean we stop referencing and talking about the home language. So that's another strategy that you can use with your kidlets. All right. So, and Mona says, my students love seeing their language being used. Very briefly, and not totally related to this, but I thought was really important. We talk about tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 words. Quite often, because tier 1 words are those regular conversation words that we use every day, if you have a student whose home language is still being spoken in the home primarily, the likelihood is that their conversations live in that tier 1 world. When we start introducing tier 2 and tier 3 words, one of the strategies that you can use to help extend the student's home language, because they're not necessarily going to use those words at home. That's why they're tier 2 words, that you ask the parents to help you, like, what does this word, what does compare mean? Or how do we say compare in your home language? Because if a student's exposure to their home language is only from conversation at home, they're missing out a depth of vocabulary related to academic work, which I had never considered before when I had the conversation with Stephanie. So anytime that you can incorporate or use or promote home language to build those connections, super helpful.
Charlie, did you see Greg's question with regards to the suffixes for the verb bases that turn them into nouns? So is there a reason to choose one over the other, or is it related to the history of the word?
My guess is that there's some sort of etymology piece at play. My guess would be, without some like solid digging in, that words that come from a Latin origin might have different tendencies than ones that come from like a Greek origin. So yeah, I think it would depend on kind of the words that we investigated. And
I know there was some studies done on whether you use ible or able. Like, so is it IBLE or ABLE? When would you use one of those? And words that with the Latin root, so would go with the IBLE, and words that don't have that Latin etymology would be the ABLE. So that's interesting. Yeah.
The other thing I find interesting with English spelling that kind of makes me laugh a little bit is at one point there was a time when we were like, ooh, we need to get back to our Latin roots. And they changed the spelling of certain words to make it look more Latin. And so we're going to come across words where we see that happening, where it's like, oh, we spelt it this way and that made sense. But then, you know, they didn't feel like it was Latin enough. And so they changed the spelling of a particular word. Of course, none are coming to mind as I say that, but I know it's a thing. So here's your challenge. Over the course of the next month, take notice of the words around you. Pick one. I mean, if you can only pick one, you're doing so much better than me, because I'm distracted by words all the time now. But take some time and just ask yourself, how do I think this word is built? What's the base? What other words might share the space? Does this prefix make sense? Can I think of other words that use this prefix or this suffix? Is there something in Edym Online that helps me understand, you know, what this letter's doing here? It doesn't appear to be making a sound, so why is it there? Or